sales.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
She quit out all her accounts.
Oh, okay, well.
I handed in the phone book when I left.
Good to see you too.
Good to see you. You been chasing raccoons lately?
And Jolt Cola. Yeah. Well, I have it. I've got it too on a CD.
Hello everyone, I'm Howard Reynolds, and I have a story for you about how I came to work at KNUZ. I had been fired from KRBE AM, and I was looking for a job, and I decided I wanted to work for KNUZ. Well, they didn't have any openings at the time when I was applying, so I started to stalk Bruce Nelson. I would listen to where he was going to be in an appearance and then show up every single time. So he said, look, you don't have to do this. I'm going to hire you. I just don't have any place for you right now. So I said, okay, that's fine. And about 2 months later, he called and said, come to work for me. So I did. And I remained there for 14 years, right until the bitter end. The interesting story that I have for you is KNUZ had switched to an all news and opinion format from an oldies format. Well, I did the last show. Right after that, they disappeared from the Arbitrons. No more ratings. They didn't show up. So, interestingly enough, Arbitron had sent me a diary. So I said, okay, well, I'll fill this out the way I listen to radio. And on 6 to midnight on Sunday is when I worked at KNUZ. I wrote in 6 to midnight on Sunday. Because I was there. I had to listen to it. I was a board operator. So after that book ended, there was much elation among the KNUZ staff because they finally showed up in the ratings. And they said, did you hear? Did you hear? We finally showed up in the book. And I didn't say a word because I knew that they wouldn't. That would probably not be appreciated. So if you wanted an embarrassing moment, that could be it. But they finally showed up in the book because they sent me a diary, and I was forced to listen to that. So that's my interesting story.
Okay, I'm Mike Marshall. Worked at KQUE from about 1983 until things closed down in, 1997, I guess. I started working on weekends, and then after a couple of years, I did from 9 to midnight. It was actually a second job. I had a day job selling stereo at Home Entertainment, and I came in to work from 9 to midnight for about 14 years almost. One of the funny moments I can remember was the only chance that you had to go get a cup of coffee or whatever, they either put on a long record to go while the newscast was on, so we had ABC News. And so apparently at some time ABC decided to cut their newscast by 1 minute. So I happened to be back in the coffee bar when the guy said, and that's all the news. So I made a bad dash back in there before there was too much dead air. I think my most embarrassing moment, I had a call from my daughter. She was at a wedding reception, and she wanted me to play a song for the bride and groom. And the first thing I could think of was the last line of a song by Linda Ronstadt called "Long, Long Time." It said, "I think I'm going to love you for a long, long time," but the whole rest of the song is about, I'm really sorry I couldn't ever get together with you. Every time I tried, we could never get together, and you went away, and I think I'm going to love you for a long, long time. I thought it was an appropriate song for a bride and groom, and then I realized it wasn't at all after I played the record.
My name is Walter Hammock. I worked at KNUZ and KQ from '74 for about 22 years. Great people, great radio station, great relationships. Most everybody who's still above ground is here today, so just great times. My most embarrassing moment in radio, I was working for a station, KHOG, K-Hog Radio in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And back in those days, we were required to do the news. And it was what was called rip and read. You would rip the news off the teletype wire and then read it, which was all good and well if you knew what you were reading, but I didn't necessarily always pre-read. So I was doing the farm report, and I came across the word EWE. which became iwi. Not a U, but an iwi. That's kind of embarrassing. I know the farmers all over the country were laughing about that one. And in that same newscast, there was a story about Bedouin terrorists in Spain. They became Boudin terrorists. I learned then that I should probably pre-read the stories. We didn't have a Google back then, so I couldn't look it up. That's easily my most embarrassing moment.
I'm Charlie C. I worked at KNUZ from 1973 to 1980. And embarrassing moments in broadcasting. One time working for KIKK, I was broadcasting live from the Northline Harris County Fair. And they had the mobile unit elevated, held up by cranes, guy wires. So I'm suspended about 20 feet off the ground. And we had the records in there and the turntables going, the whole 9 yards. When all of a sudden the kids at the fair figured out if they pulled on the guy wires, the mobile unit would swing like that. And everything went flying. My lunch, my Coke, the Coke I was drinking, all the records off the turntable, all of it. But we managed to get it going again.
My name is Bud Smith, and my only experience at KNUZ was August 16th, 1977. We all know what that date represents. Charlie C. called me, said, hey, we don't have any turntables in the control room, and they want to go 24-hour with Elvis. So we need some Elvis music. So Johnny Goyen and I took our Elvis albums down to KNUZ and spent about 5 or 6 hours recording our albums to a big reel-to-reel recorder, taking the reel-to-reel in the control room, and Charlie C. and Chuck Tiller, Chuck worked midnight to 6, Charlie C. and Chuck Tiller would rotate the Elvis songs on the reel-to-reel with what few carts they had Elvis music on. And that got them through the night as KNUZ went 24 hours Elvis. Now, as far as my embarrassing moment, I remember one. I was working at KIKK. Leona Williams had a record out called Country Girl with Hot Pants On. I played that record. And I don't know why I did, but after the record was over, I said, that's Leona Williams, Country Girl with Hot Pants On. The only thing I can think of better than that is a city girl without hot pants on. I shouldn't have said that. That's my embarrassing moment.
No, I didn't. My name's Sherry Garrett. Think about when that was. It was so long ago. I think I started there in maybe 1974, 73 or 74, and I worked there worked in radio for 15 years, so I'm not sure how long a span that is, but it was a long time and a really sweet time in my life, and made lots of great friends, and I'm so happy to be back here today. It's been 2 years since we've all seen each other, and it's a real treat. It's a real treat to be here.
I'm Mary and then Eileen McGovern, and I worked at KQUE KNUZ in the late 80s, and the most embarrassing time was when I entered into the control room talking and Scott was on the air. And I'm pretty much retired now. I retired from the Houston Chronicle, and I'm working at the local school doing English intervention. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack Tyler. I was at KNUZ and KQ around 1966, 7, 8, and up to 72. With Joe Ford, Buddy McGregor, Forrest Patton, Webb Hunt, Paul Berlin. And as far as an embarrassing moment, I've never had one. And that really means I'm not a gentleman because nothing embarrasses me. Nice to see you.
Thomas Goodell.
radio fan and disc jockey fan and record collector. Record collector and survey collector and air check collector.
8 more. Worked at KNUZ when we brought it back to oldies in the early 90s. Had a lot of fun there, on the air, made some good memories. Many of them we don't talk about today now that we're married and things like that, but it was the best time of my life.
Roger Dimmick. I've worked in KAYC over Dave Morris, and I'm talking today for Jack Piper, and he wanted to be sure to come up there and said that he said, you can tell, I'll let him go. So that's for us. That's a good one.
We were both traffic guys. We both worked for Traffic Central. I did traffic with Dr. Bruce, with Paul Berlin, Barry and Cindy, some of Scott Arthur, and then I filled in doing sports with Mike Millette and Wes Johnson. Yes. And I have a long history with KNUZ, KQ. I love that station. I worked for 15 years with Paul Berlin, and we still play a show at KSEV now, Saturday night, 6 to 8, so you can still hear Paul Berlin on the air in Houston.
You have to get a plug-in for the station.
Yeah, right?
Boy, you are. Like, are you an executive or something now? You should be. I think they should need a raise anyway.
I just kind of I try to stand next to good-looking guys like here, so it's not so bad.
Oh, boy, I don't think there was anybody in traffic that was better looking than this guy.
Oh, yeah, right.
I tell you.
Marty Ambrose.
Marty Ambrose was also really good looking,
Marty
too.
Ambrose impression.
Yes. But, yeah, this was one of the best times of my whole life because doing traffic in those days, 30 years ago, was a tough job because there was no cameras on the freeway, you know. So you couldn't go by the cameras. You had to talk to CBers on the radio. You had to talk to the two-way radio for people who were driving around, and you had to look out the window, among other things. And what was the other thing we used?
We actually had mobile units, remember?
Oh, yeah.
People that drove the freeways, and back then we had two-ways, but you couldn't do reports on the two-way because it wasn't legal yet.
That's
and
right.
so we had numbers. We'd stop at different little filling stations and find a phone booth, and you give them a number, and they'd call you, and then you do your report on the phone.
Yes.
And so we actually had people on the freeways, real live information, real time.
That's right. Yeah. It was, my point is just that now you look at the cameras, they'll show you what's on the freeway, and you can see if there's an accident or a stalled car or not. It's so much easier now. And the people who do it are so much better looking than we were. And I don't know if you noticed that on television or not, but they're all much better looking than we were.
We both learned under Marty Ambrose, so he was the best.
Well, no, other than the times that we said there was an accident there, and people would call and say, you said there was an accident. There wasn't an accident there. And that's embarrassing, you know. I drove right through it. So, you know, if the boss would find out about that, Marty Ambrose would find out, he'd call us and say, try to get it right next time.
Hi, this is Harold Gunn. And I had programs on KNUZ forever and ever and ever. Though I was never an employee, I was always an independent producer. But had a good time there for a long time. Also did commercials there forever. But the most embarrassing moment for me on radio was I was doing my outdoor show at a private studio, actually. And we were having some problems with the equipment. And I was getting this feedback in my ears, and it was like blowing the top of my head off. And so I told the engineer, I said, hey, this naughty word is blowing the wax out of my ears. And I said, of course, you didn't record that, did you? Well, no, it was on a computer. So then we started again, got rid of the problem, got the radio program done, and then I sent it out then on DVDs to all of my affiliate stations. And my primary Houston station on Monday, the general manager called me and said, Harold, you're the first person to ever say MF on our air. And I went, oh no, how did that happen? I mean, how did that happen? How did he not pick it up when he put it on DVDs, right? So this particular general manager, I said, you got the DVD, I need it back. And he said, oh no. He said, I'm keeping this forever. But that's just one of many. When you're on the air as long as some of them have been, this September will be my 60th year, and I'm still at it. And I'm still getting embarrassed.
Okay. I'm Bob Edwards. I worked at KNUZ back in 1991 and 92 as program director. And KNUZ and KQUE, they were just great radio stations to work for. It was like a family. Still is. We're still here. And probably, I guess, the most embarrassing moment in radio, not at KNUZ, but just in radio in general, was something wasn't completely going right. I hadn't queued up a tape correctly and shouted out the F word. And when I did, I noticed that the meters on the control console slammed over, and I realized I had forgotten to turn my microphone off. Oh my God. I knew that was my last day in radio. But would you believe? Nobody called. Nobody called. So I survived it. So now the statute of limitations is over, and I guess that's it. But anyway, thank you for asking.
Name is Tom Franklin. Worked at KQUE overnights from 1977 to 1981. It's my first professional job in radio. The first time I got paid for doing anything in radio. Paul Berlin hired me, and it was a great honor to be one of Paul's proteges. The most embarrassing moment probably would have happened after I left KQUE. I was working for KTRH and KLOL and doing sports in the morning for Stevens and Pruitt. And during the holiday season, Stevens and Pruitt had what they called the Holiday Ball. And it was a parade. It was very funny, of young women who would come in holding little gift bags, dressed like they were going to work. They would go into the women's restroom, change into some very revealing lingerie, go in the studio with Stevens and Pruitt to try and get tickets to the Holiday Ball. Stevens and Pruitt were in one studio. I was across the glass in the other studio doing sports, and they would send some of these women in to distract me doing my sports upcast. And so one time I had a young lady who was topless on this side of my head, a young lady who was topless on this side of my head, and one in the back of my head, and I still had to maintain my composure to try and do my sportscast while all was that. It probably didn't get any worse than doing that.
I'm Chuck Tiller. I worked at KNUZ from 1975 to 81, then came back and worked for another year until 1983. This embarrassing moment actually involves Tom Franklin. He doesn't know this, but it did, yes. So one night, I wanted to go get some coffee, so I put on Mary McGregor's Torn Between Two Lovers, which was 3 minutes and 36 seconds long. I went to the coffee bar, and I'm listening to the monitor, and I'm stirring my coffee, and I looked out the window at Blodgett Street, and thought, well, that's enough time. I better get back to the control room. When I got back to the KNUZ control room, it's dead. There's nothing on the air. I'm going, what in the hell happened? They didn't tell anybody, but earlier that day, they switched the station's in-house monitor from KNUZ to KQUE. And it just so happened that Tom Franklin started the same song that I was playing about 40 seconds later. Thus, I'm in the coffee bar thinking I had plenty of time, and I didn't. Why is it embarrassing? Well, about 30, 40 seconds of dead air, which would mean nothing now. And come to think of it, would mean nothing then because we were on 250 watts. Who could hear us? And that's my story. Sticking to it.
Well, I enjoyed it very, very much. Bob Vaden, and worked a lot with Walter Hammock and Jim, our sales manager. Just great people, and I left because I got I was going with somebody, a lady, and she looked at my check and it said $1. I thought it might be a good time to leave. Thank you.
Hey, Chumby, how you doing? Glad to be at the KNUZ KQ Reunion, and fond memories of the day with my Groove Record Shop, Walt Hammock, and doing the ads, and Paul Berlin and the gang, and Ronnie Renfro and all of them, and of course Captain Harold. But it's just great to be here, and thank you for doing the video, and we're having a marvelous time, and hope many to come. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Trixie Bond. I worked at KNUZ from 1981 to 1986 in sales. And my most embarrassing moment came when I was about 8 months pregnant, and my account was Rick's Cabaret. I had to, of course, being a club like that, it was cash up front for any kind of advertising. And well, I walked in there 8 months pregnant, and while the owner was going through photographs of potential girls to dance for the club. It's an interesting story here. One photograph, this young woman who was a law student had a little tiny tattoo that big on her ankle, and they were all in this big discussion about she couldn't dance because she had a tattoo. Well, that wouldn't go now. But anyway, I was also the voice of Rick's Cabaret, and when they looked at this 8-month pregnant woman as the voice of Rick's Cabaret, you should have seen the looks on their faces. Thank you, Harold Gunn.
She's wide enough back there to get it. You'll sit down and get the camera over and Chumby, and then we're done, okay?
You're doing it.
Get attention, Steve. Chumby. Come on, pay attention. Chumby, you ready? I'm trying to. I'm very trying.